Hey everybody, this is Al. We're here at the Kelly Writers House under the tent. A couple more weeks under the tent. We kind of like it though. It's nice. We're here for week 2. Week 2 is great. We have, so far in the Google Hangouts, we have Jake and Dave. Jake, say hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. How are you? Sitting there in Palo Alto, California. I'm still having trouble imagining you in Palo Alto, but it seems to be happening okay.
I have trouble imagining myself here.
And Dave Poplar is here. Hi, Dave. Say something, Dave.
Sorry, it took a while for me to get my audio up.
Okay.
Hi.
Good. Great. How are you? Good to see you. And we have some fabulous people. Super fabulous. I'm going to run out of supers after a while if I start with super. So let me just say fabulous. I just screwed that up. Davey, hello.
Hey, Al.
Anna, hello.
Hey, Al.
Lily, hello.
Hello.
Jason at the table.
Hello.
And although she doesn't quite have a mic yet because she's doing chair stuff, Amber Rose Johnson is here and she is personing the phone. Hi, Amber Rose.
Hi, Al.
Thank you. Hey, we have Chris and we have Zach and we have some friends here today and we can get the camera. Oh, I got the camera on them. We've got Jonah and Joanne and Jamie and Sophia and Alina and Michael and Jamie and others, and we're going to actually they're going to get the mic even though they don't want to at some point today. So it's week 2, and did I miss anybody? I don't think I did. I just have a couple of shout-outs, and then we're going to get started. So please plan to call us. We have Lily and Davey both looking at the Twitter feed. So if you just use hashtag ModPoLive or ModOlive, then they will see it, and they will chime in and tell us what you're tweeting about. Jason is looking at Facebook, and I believe that the video has been shared from YouTube to Facebook so that, yes, Zach, so that people can type comments under that video player in Facebook. So, but will the comments work there? Yes.
Yes.
So you can comment there because Jason's going to be looking at that, and Anna is going to be looking at the discussion forum. So please, there's a special Webcast subforum thread, so please take a look there. All right, that's what's happening there. And as I said, Amber Rose is on the phone, and the number is 610-616-3208, 610-616-3208. The second caller. Now, this is bad because people will hesitate to call first. But anyway, the second caller is going to get a copy of one of my favorite books of poems, Julia Block's Valley Fever. It's a great book. It's like partly a Sacramento, California book. So, and I'd like to shout out this book. It's called Woman, and it's by our favorite longtime ModPoer, T. De Los Reyes, who is in I think she's right in Manila, in the Philippines. She may not be quite back there yet. She's been traveling very luxuriously, it seems, all around Southeast and East Asia. And we adore T, and I've been reading these poems, and they're amazing. So I'm really glad to shout this out. Now, while I'm doing some other shout-outs, I'm going to pass this along to Anna, who can figure out information about how you might order yourself a copy. It might actually come down to your contacting T and asking her to get...
That's what T said. T says that you should contact T.
Okay, so the answer is we don't need Anna to tell us that. We have Davey to tell us that. Contact T, and she is contactable in so many ways, and I'm sure she'll tell you how. And there's a blurb from Eileen Tabios. By the way, we're going to at some point be adding Eileen. She's a Filipino-American poet who's done very interesting work in haiku. And we're going to be working with Eileen and with our gang here to get a ModPo Plus video. So that's the book. That's a shout out there. All right, 2 more shout outs, and then we're going to get started. What I'm going to do actually is list list the titles of the poems, and I'm going to ask our panelists here and some others to start by simply saying what your favorite poem in this week is at the moment. Okay, a shout out to someone by the name of Sarah Ashley Maynard. My name is Sarah Ashley from Providence, Rhode Island, and I am brand new to ModPo. I heard of the course through my sister, Amber Rose Johnson. She doesn't say Amber Rose Johnson, just say my sister. And after hearing of its function and purpose, taking no prisoners, this sister, function and purpose, I decided I want to be a part.
Amber Rose, am I the second caller?
Wow. That sounds like Ray. Okay, Ray, hold on. Hold on, Ray. We're still doing shout-outs.
Voice of God.
The voice of God. Ray Maxwell, the voice of God. That's VOG, Ray, VOG.
Hello?
Hello, hold on, Ray. We're still doing preliminaries. So Sarah Ashley is a spoken word artist, an author, playwright, and painter. Multi-talented, Amber Rose. It's hard to compete with siblings like that. Multi-genre artist, you can say. I've loved wordplay since the age of 3 when my dad began reading poems to me from Where the Sidewalk Ends. My father, a songwriter and musician himself, man, you have reason to be proud of this family, has been one of my biggest influences in my writing. Notice she doesn't mention Amber Rose, which stems from a spiritual aspect. I've never formally studied poetry, and guess what, Sarah Ashley? You're still not formally studying poetry in ModPo, but you're doing something better, which is studying it, can we say informally? Or its form, so I'm eager to learn as much as I am in the process of trying to publish my first chapbook now. Most of my poetry is free verse. Nevertheless, I'm excited to be here. I love that nevertheless. No, there's a lot of free verse. So Sarah Ashley, welcome. And thank you for being the sibling of such a fabulous, super fabulous person. So one more shout out and then we'll get to the call. No, Ray's going to have to hold on because I'm going to do a list of the poems today and get everybody to say what their favorite is at the moment. I just want to tell a story from Tuhin Bohal, who is in Bangalore in India. He's a very active new ModPoer. And recently, Tuhin went to a book launch there in Bangalore, basically a poetry reading. And during the Q&A question, Tuhin started asking questions about Dickinson and Whitman, and the person, the host who was fielding the questions, afterwards came up to Tuhin and said, "So you're doing ModPo, right?" And there they were in Bangalore. They've met this Tuhin, ModPoer, and the host, who's not named in this post, who apparently was a longtime ModPoer. And this is how you find your friends in Bangalore, by hanging out with people in Philadelphia. So proud of that part of it. Okay, today, week 2, the poems are, and I'm going to list them, then I'm going to go around and get favorites from people, and then we'll get to talk to Ray on the phone. So, William Carlos Williams Smell, William Carlos Williams Danse Russe, Allen Ginsberg's Supermarket, California, Laureen Niedeker's Grandfather Advised Me, Laureen Niedeker's You Are My Friend, Laureen Niedeker's Foreclosure. Laureen Niedeker gets 3 poems in the main ModPo syllabus in week 2. I don't think there's anything like that. I think Silliman gets 2 in week 8. I think Williams gets 2 this week and maybe 2 next week, but Niedeker gets 3 in 1 week. And Sid Corman's It Isn't for Want, which is kind of anthemic of the course, and Ray Armentrout's The Way. Those are the main syllabus poems. And in ModPo Plus, Sid Corman's Enuresis, which is about bedwetting, William Carlos Williams' Catholic Bells, Ray Armentrout's Second Person, which is a new edition. 3 more from Niedeker. Yes, Laureen Niedeker. Easter Greeting, great poem. I Married, great poem. Popcorn Can Cover, which is sort of is a rising star in the ModPo firmament. It's a recent one. Hannah Sanghi Park has a Dear Sir poem, which is very Dickinsonian, and a poem called Connected by the poet sitting 2 people to my right, Jason Suska. A fine poet, Connected. A very, very new poem by a British poet by the name of John Phillips, who's very closely connected to Sid Corman, and the poem's called This. poem, Zach, is called This. That's not the poem. That's something that T sent me, a postcard that T sent me a few years ago. But Kit Robinson's Leaves of Class, and Divya Victor's W is for Walt Whitman's Soul. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around quickly, and we're going to get just a list, like the poem that's on your brain right now, and the portable mic Sophia has, and we're going to actually have that thing go all the way around to everybody. So Jason, just the poem, what is it? Which is your favorite right now?
Let's see. Right now, it would be Elizabeth Willis's survey.
And I forgot to put that on the list. Darn me, but I actually printed it out because I love it so much. Thank you. Lily?
I think I Married by Lorene Niedecker.
I'm Married, new favorite. Anna?
I'm going to go Niedecker also, popcorn can cover.
Popcorn can cover.
Yeah.
I'm
Davey?
gonna go Willis also, a dress.
Whoa, ModPo Plus is in the lead. You know how at the ballparks they have these like weird races of subway cars and stuff? Like, Niedecker is really charging out ahead. Amber Rose, favorite at the moment?
I'm staying classic and going with Danse Rouge.
Danse Rouge. Okay, we're definitely going to talk about today. Okay, Sophia, say your favorite and pass the mic along.
Mine was W is for Walt Whitman's Soul.
Divya Victor. Okay, Alina.
Mine was Supermarket California.
Cool. This is Joanne Miller, who's been a longtime ModPoer and first-time attendee
Yeah.
here at the... Welcome, Joanne.
Thanks so much, Al. It isn't for want.
It isn't for want.
I'm going to have to
Jonah.
go with Ray Armentrout's The Way.
The Way. Oh, we'll get to talk about that today. Jamie?
Mine is Foreclosure.
Foreclosure. Great poem. Jamie?
W is for Walt Whitman's Soul, Divya Victor.
That's so great. And you are a new member of this community. I want not only for you to introduce yourself, but say what you're doing, who you are, what you do.
Hi, I'm Ujjwala. I'm from Nepal. I do spoken word poetry with a group called Word Warriors back home. This week, my favorite poem, I think, the poem that stuck to me was Enuresis.
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 Oh, that's such a
Enuresis.
traumatic poem. I hope we get to talk about it. Michael.
Ray Armentrout, The Way.
The Way. Okay, great. All right, so let's give Sophia back the mic. Amber Rose, you want to bring Ray up?
No, you got it.
You're good. Snaps for Amber Rose, who's figured it all out. She's got the headset. Okay. Hi, Ray. Ray Maxwell, can you hear me? We had him before when we didn't want him, and now when we want him.
No, we always want them. We were just surprised. I was
I'm
surprised.
not. Am I? Are you my like nice alter ego today? Like fixing me? Say, you know how they had that the Obama skit where the angry Obama was being. Well,
be
this
the
is the
opposite
opposite, right? The nice Al.
Yeah, I'll be
What
nice.
Al's trying to say is, Ray, we love you. All right. Okay, let's try to. Ray, if you can hear us, call back, and the number is 610-616-3208. I don't know what we're going to do about Ray. We're going to. Okay. All right. So let's take the people at the table. Oh, Dave and Jake, favorite poems, and we're going to talk about one of the two that you suggest. Jake, Dave, and Erica's here. Hi, Erica. Favorite poems from this week, Jake.
I'm going to go with the Supermarket in California.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Dave, favorite?
I've always loved The Way, but what's in my mind most recently is Sid Corman's It Isn't for Want.
It Isn't for Want. Okay, great. Erica, favorite poem this week, right now?
I'd
currently?
echo The Way.
The Way. Okay. I think we should talk for a minute about The Way. What do you think? Yeah, let's do that. It's a very difficult poem. So everything's falling apart here.
Especially because Ray Armentrout's going to be joining us in a few weeks.
Ray Armentrout is coming to a webcast. Wow.
Week 6.
I think we should listen to Ray read the poem and then just get a few people to talk about it. Okay, here we go. Okay, here it goes. Ready, Chris? Audio?
The Way. Card in pew pocket announces, I am here. I made only one statement because of a bad winter. Grease is the word, Grease is the way. I am feeling real life emergencies or flubbing behind the scenes. As a child, I was abandoned in a story made of trees. Here's the small gasp of this clearing come upon again.
Okay. Davy, say one thing, and then we'll go to one thing about that poem that gets people started, because people have trouble with it. And Erica, then we'll turn to you to say something about it that can maybe connect her to Dickinson, which is hard.
Something that's really classic Ray Armantrout about this poem is that the lines add up differently in pairs and across stanzas than they do alone. As a child, I was abandoned in a story made of trees.
Yeah.
And that the way that Ray is pulling in and out of materiality. As a child, I was abandoned. This is a material history. I was abandoned in a story, dematerialized, in a story made of trees, rematerialized, but now conceptual because the story is made of trees.
Yeah.
And trying to think about causality, thinking about what's the speaker's agency, what's someone else's agency,
Right.
what are the verbs doing,
Right.
and thinking about that material immaterial pull, and the way that the lines switch from one valence to another so quickly is beautifully classic Ray Armantrout happening here.
And that was beautifully classic Davy, because you said one thing which had about 12 elements in it. But I think if there were one thing, I'm going to turn it over to Erica here, this is a real challenge, a challenging topic. What Ray Armantrout does for us is that she looks forward to what happens in late modern and definitely contemporary poetry, which is that there is not a feeling of being beholden to the idea that one speaker presents a poem, that there is a single subjectivity, a single subject. There are lots of subjects around because intersubjectivity is the mode, because many voices can be heard. The poet can be a transcriber of something she overhears in the world, which is the sense you have at the beginning of this poem, that there's many sources of lines and they can be put in there, and that the reader is baffled, or the reader is lost, as it were in a wood, as it were in a story, lost. And that being lost is okay. I mean, it's not okay for the various people in this poem because there's some people suffering here, but it's okay for a reader to start thinking that the speaker is one thing, one person, and then realize that the speaker is multiple. Poems can contain multitudes, which makes this Dickinsonian in its angularity, but Whitmanian perhaps in its multivocality. So Erica, here's the challenge then. Why is this in a week where we refer to Dickinsonian poets? How is this Dickinsonian? Because I think, Erica, Dickinson often has one subject.
Yeah, I think so too. So I would agree that the polyvocality links to Whitman. But the thing that I love about this poem is the way that Armantrout is thinking very carefully about the unit of the stanza and the lyrical stanza. And that's something that feels very Dickinsonian to me.
Yeah, that's really good. Lily, and then we'll go to Jamie, this Jamie. You can just respond to what Lily says. Lily, quickly make sense, if you can, of the content of this poem story, which is that there's a moment where there's an I that seems to be Ray Armantrout-like, or young poet-like, young girl becomes woman poet later type person. As a child, I was abandoned in a story made of trees. What can you make sense of that?
I think there's a lot of readings you could make even just of that one collection of lines as that Davy highlighted earlier. As a child, I was abandoned. So you could think of it as like poet developing their consciousness in the world, kind of like I was guided and parented, and then I became my own self and my own subjectivity. You could think of it as like reading and making yourself vulnerable to a text feels like abandonment in a way, like it's not necessarily a comforting feeling. It's a feeling of being lost and being suddenly abandoned. I just think a lot about, with this poem, the feeling, the extremely common fear for children of being abandoned, and how like you could think of it as a positive scene, like a child sitting with a book seems very comfortable and like a sweet scene, but that for that individual it could actually be a very scary and profound, in the sense of literally deep and lost kind of a experience.
Very cool. Okay, Jamie, it's coming over to you, but I'm going to ask you I've decided there's going to be a question here, okay? So let me stipulate first that in ModPo, what we're all about a lot of the time is trying to figure out how a poem, a particular poem, is doing what it's saying. It's not just words that say things about things that other people are doing, but the poem itself is an act of doing something that it says. If that's true of the way, and I think it is, how is the poem doing what Lily just said it's saying? Whoa.
I had sort of, when I was reading the poem, I'd sort of focused on how it was trying to locate itself and discover its location. In addition to being,
you just did it. You just answered the question. Explain. No, that's brilliant. Say more. The poem is trying to locate itself, just like the girl we see in the middle of the poem.
The girl is trying to locate her language. I think that's where the quotes at the very end.
Story.
Yeah.
In words.
Yeah, and by using other people's language, by reading and thereby speaking, she's beginning to find herself and find where she is.
Oh, that's so good. It's kind of like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Girl. That is to say, we have this glimpse of Ray Armentrout figuring out that abandonment. This is my reading of it. I could, people disagree, but abandonment isn't such a bad thing. When your mother is reading you a story, I always imagine that because Ray talks about her mother reading to her. It's not in the poem, but if a parent or an adult is reading you a story and you get lost in it, you become addicted to stories, and that becomes a way in which it becomes a kind of transitional object, to use the Freudian phrase. That is to say, you're supposed to be attached, in the Freudian model, you're attached to your mother or father, especially with reading to your mom, and then your mom is actually teaching you to stray from her because you get lost in a story rather than completely involved in her, and that becomes the beginning of your linguistic self. That's pretty cool. Okay, one last thought on this poem, and then we'll. How are we doing with phone calls? Are we having trouble? We're good. Okay, so 610-616-3208. I'm going to ask Anna to say something about the way, and then we're going to gather some tweets and some thread points and maybe some Facebook points, and we'll just respond to those. Okay, Anna, something quick about the way.
I think this poem makes a very good argument for why it is great to listen to poets read their own work when possible, because I think in hearing Ray perform it, you really hear the polyvocality, you really hear the multiplicity of voices and sources of text that she's collected, and I think you really hear that when you listen to her perform it.
Yeah.
And I'll just quote, actually, Anthony Watkins, who just posted in the one of our CTAs, he just posted in the forums, and he just wrote, "It's so funny to hear you all take the way apart, and for me, it's an open poem about the feelings of being in church. I actually wrote a poem in response to this morning. I was obnoxious enough to send it to Ray, and she was gracious enough to say thank you."
Whoa. That's great. He sent the poem to Ray Armentrout.
Yeah.
Well, that's really circular. I love that. Okay, so I'm going to gather Jason from Facebook, Lily and Davey from Twitter, and from the threads, from the discussion forums. Just quickly, a couple of things that are coming up. Davey, you first?
T has a really lovely gloss on the way.
T herself.
T herself.
Hi, T.
Lovely.
What time is it there? It's probably...
Just past midnight.
Yeah, about 1 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah. In which T says, Ray Armentrout's The Way confronts the idea of abandonment and transforms it into something valuable, loss as surrendered to what can happen, surrendered to the possibilities.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm glad to know that T and I agree on that. That's great. Anna, what do you got?
There's some interest in the forums for us to talk about Smell, Williams' poem Smell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's put a pin in that.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to put a pin in William Carlos Williams' nose, but to mix the metaphor. Lily, what do we got in the tweets?
Let's see. Ray resurfaced. He seems to be okay. Hi, Ray.
I think he was trying to call from outside, so it may be that he lost the connection. Yeah.
Let's see. Something I love is that Sanjeev posted a link to one of Ujwala's performances on Twitter. Crazy.
Wow, Sanjeev
which he found on YouTube.
He was in England for a while, I think, or New England, and then moved back to India.
Yeah. So I thought that was.
Ujwala, you're famous.
Yeah. ModPo people follow ModPo Live.
People.
Find a link there.
And some people are emailing Ray Armentrout, and some people are. Oh, it's all. What's the song? We Are the World, I think is the song. We Are the Children. Sorry.
I'm not translating that.
Getting a little weepy here. Jason, what do we got?
We've got Dylan and Mandana talking about listening to the recordings. Dylan says, it's interesting to hear the way Ray says, the way, ... I am feeling. And Mandana says, I know how I read this poem in my own head and voice. Hearing it in Ray's is like the turn of a kaleidoscope, and I suddenly see new patterns and colors.
Very cool. What I'd like to do is go to the caller, Amber Rose, and ask Jake and Dave to respond to whatever the caller asks. So who do we got, Amber Rose?
We have Catherine Horowitz on the phone.
Oh, cool. Hi, Catherine. Can you hear me?
Hi, Al. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Are you Katrin?
I am.
Yeah.
Katrin, yes.
Katrin. Got it. That's what Amber Rose said. I shouldn't second guess Amber Rose. Hi. You have been associated with ModPo for a long time.
It's 7 years now, yes.
7 years.
Just delighted to be back.
Is it possible this is your first call in 7 years?
It is.
It's amazing.
I'm more of a lurker than a getting out there.
Oh.
But I was so thrilled with John Phillips' poem, This.
Yeah. That is very cool. Okay, so great. Do you want to stay on the line for a little bit, and we'll get Dave and Jake to respond to it. I'm going to read it aloud so they know what to do with it. Would you stay on the line and then maybe respond? Okay, great. So I'm going to ModPo Plus, which is under Resources, and this. Oh, if you search for this, it kind of comes up a lot. Phillips. Okay. Yeah, but my thing it just never works. Mac Air. Do not buy a Mac Air. Anybody, sorry. Yeah, I'm just not getting it, but I'm just going to go another way. So, all right, I'm going to read this by John Phillips, who is a British poet, and we don't do British poets in ModPo much, but he was very, very close. He got sort of introduced to Sid Corman when Sid was still alive, and they made a connection, and then Phillips has been kind of a Cormanian poet ever since. This poem's called This. I should say. It's called This. Whatever else it is, a poem is often nothing more than thinking there's something there to be found when there's nothing but thinking so. Ooh, I better read that again. Okay. And Jake and Dave are scrambling to find this. This is in ModPo Plus, Part 1. This. Whatever else it is, a poem is often nothing more than thinking there's something there to be found when there's nothing but thinking so. This is a brand new video that we did the other day, right? Like last week. ModPo is alive. ModPo Live. Mod Olive is happening. All right, Jake, I bought you a minute. Can you start us off on dealing with that poem? It's very Cormanian.
Sure.
Okay.
With pleasure. Okay, so I want to just start by pointing out all the line breaks here.
Yeah, I didn't read the line breaks very well. I should have read it like Creeley would read it.
Well, maybe I'll give it a shot, if I may.
Okay, would you?
Whatever else it is, a poem is often nothing more than thinking. There's something there to be found when there's nothing but thinking so.
This is what you do, Jake. You've done this before. Tell us what you've just done besides screwing around with the logic. Using line breaks to mess with conventional sense making.
Well, I think it's in there. That ambiguity of these line breaks really lend themselves to messing with possibilities of where sense could go. Whatever else it is, a poem like that's a complete line, and you could stop before the word poem, or you could keep rolling the way you were rolling. But I kind of like the just the surprise and maybe the kind of like the discontinuous little tidbits of these lines. And you are talking about nothing and something.
Yes.
You start to it starts to the meaning starts to come together as you're putting these shreds together, or to the contrary, you're picking the shreds apart, and then all of a sudden the something and the nothing starts to interact in a poem-like way.
So Anna, I'm going to turn to Dave in a second, but Anna, what Jake just did is the usual thing that he does, which is to take a poem that was once upon a time fairly straightforward as a metapoem, and he made it kind of impossible, still metapoetic. Can you go back to fairly straightforward? What is this, the title? What does the title refer to?
This, to me, seems to refer to either the poem that we have in front of us or the act of poeming.
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 Okay. Right. So if we were to paraphrase the poem, Anna, in the simplest way, the sin of paraphrasing a poem, a ModPo poem, that's a sin. What would we do? You're about to commit a sin. Sorry, I know you take that seriously.
I sure do.
I know.
No.
Don't commit a sin.
No.
It's the sin of paraphrase. It goes back to the new criticism. It's not really a sin.
Sure.
It's a sin.
I'll have to go pray
You're
on it.
not supposed to paraphrase, but you want me to do it?
No, I can do it.
Okay.
I can try. I can sin. I'll sin for you.
All right, sin for me.
I think that
This is getting very theological. She's sinning for me. She's also poeming for me.
Yeah. I think that to paraphrase the poem, it seems to be about, to the extent that it can be about anything. The fact that a poem doesn't necessarily need to be highfalutin. It doesn't need to say something really, like, quote unquote, profound about things
You're not
that poems are.
paraphrasing. You're doing brilliant analysis, but it's not a paraphrase.
Sorry. So the poem is about the fact that poems don't have to be about.
That's cool. That's still a second level.
Sorry.
Can you just say what the poem says? Am I pushing you too
A
far
poem is
here?
often nothing more than a poem.
Okay. Lily, can you try it?
Yeah.
I mean, yes. I think that's right. I didn't mean to say that you didn't get it right, but we can say more.
Look, if I'm going to sin for this.
All right. Whatever else it is, a poem is, meaning it's a little like it isn't for want of something to say. I mean, yes, poems are all these other things. They've got stories, they've got content, but
I think if you were going to pull a line, the summary would be a poem is often nothing more than thinking. So it's not, if you were going to look for the actual material object that is a poem, you would find very little. But what makes it be the meaningful, important thing it is the thinking that the reader brings to it.
nice. It's often nothing more than thinking, but I love the way Jake read this because it would stop at thinking, nothing more than thinking. Nothing more than thinking that there's something, it isn't for want of something to say, that there's something, when in fact, there's nothing but thinking that there's something.
Yeah, the only action of the poem is thinking and being.
Thinking, and so the poem is thinking that every time you're poeming, you think that poems are supposed to carry some kind of freight, some kind of load, some kind of message, something to say, something you need to know. But in fact, all it is thinking that that's true. The poem is thinking that there's something to say, but there's nothing to say except thinking that there is. And then you believe enough in creating a poem. And that's what this is. That's what this work is. For occupation, this She sits there in her room in Amherst with her friends. She's not totally alone. She's sitting there thinking, as long as I think I have something to say, I will write a poem, which is nothing more than thinking that I think it has something to say. Dave, what do you think?
This seems a little similar to the way for me in that I think both poems give this impression that language is really a tool, that the instrumentality of language, that these poems really just sort of step back. I mean, they're obviously hyper meta, but they step back and they sort of focus on this toolness of the language, the fact that it is used to do something, not something in itself. So it's sort of hyper conscious of language as a tool in this way. And ultimately, when you look at language like that, when you look at poems as just these instrumental things, what's really left is the meaning that we bring to it, that we put into it.
Yeah.
So that's just a thought I have.
That's great. Amber Rose, do we have someone on the phone? Oh, we have Katrin. Katrin?
Yes.
Hi. What do you think of all this? Why did you ask about this poem?
I asked about it because when I read a poem, a ModPo poem, usually I read it and then I think about it for a while and then I watch the video. And in the video, you read it quite differently from the way I read it in my mind. I read it more like Jake did.
Yeah.
And for me, the pivotal word there is it. Whatever else, it is a poem. And so it pivots to this and it pivots to poem. And the poem, it's just full of possibilities there. It was, I just loved the way it did that.
Yeah.
And the way it's about not thought, but thinking. The poem is a process.
Yeah.
And then as you come to the end, both this and the poem disappear. They just sort of vanish and it's over.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And I assume that you noticed that it's so much like Corman, because you've been in this course for 7 years, so you know the It Isn't for Want poem, possibly by heart.
Yes. Corman is another favorite of mine. So,
yeah.
And this just had the same openness to all the different interpretations, different possibilities, different kind of a state of mind almost.
Yeah.
And of course the focus on this, which you have made so much more important a word in my life than it ever was before ModPo.
It's a bit of a curse, this meta-poetic thinking. No, I mean, I don't know. We've been friends sort of for 7 years. I don't know where you are, what you do. I don't want you to tell us necessarily, but what do your friends and family say when you say, yeah, I'm still doing this non-credit online course at a place I've never visited 7 years later, and I keep thinking about how poems are about themselves? Don't you get cross-eyed responses to that?
Well, actually, here in Victoria, British Columbia, we have a community of poets.
Paradise.
And a poet friend of mine uses a collective, a kindness of poets. And I think
poets, yeah.
Poetry is the exact opposite of so much of what is wrong with contemporary life. We do this because not to get rich, not to get famous, not to do any of those things, not to ruin the world, but just to connect with people, to make it a better place.
You just paraphrased Corman's poem.
Yes, well, I've lived with it for a while, thanks to you.
Oh.
And one of, I don't know if you remember, but I sent you a copy of my novel that's coming out next month.
I did. I got it. And I think I posted to Facebook about it. I don't know if you saw that.
I've given up on Facebook.
Okay,
Facebook
that's
makes
fine.
me miserable.
That's fine.
But thank you for doing that.
No, I'm so glad to have it. Congratulations.
Thank you. I thought you were angry with me because of I do take Kenneth Goldsmith to task near the end of the book.
I'm not angry at you. No, I couldn't be angry at you. So Vancouver is how far away? Sorry for not knowing this.
Victoria is on the tip of Vancouver Island. Victoria is about maybe 100 kilometers away.
If we came to Vancouver, would you come visit?
I absolutely would.
Okay. Well, Zach and I were talking about Vancouver for a poem talk. But, of course, now that I've said this, Chris is looking at me, and Anna's looking at me like, when are we going? And Amber Rose is looking at me. It's so expensive, but we got to go to Vancouver. There's so much important poetry going on there.
Canadian dollars are so small.
They're so small.
Your money will go.
Oh my God.
We have tiny little dollars.
Well, we're tiny little dollars. We're going to Montreal, and we're going to come back with a boatload of videos of Canadian poets. And if we then go to Vancouver, the Canadians are going to take over ModPo, which is supposed to be about U.S. poetry. Why don't we just make it about North American poetry and then keep getting larger from there?
Could.
What do you think? Okay.
And here we are talking about a British poem.
I know. Everything is falling apart. All my boundaries are being challenged by great poetry,
Well,
it
let's
seems to me.
not build a wall around American poetry.
We're not going to build a wall. Okay. And if we do build a wall, we'll make sure the Canadians pay for it. No, I was just being funny. That's ridiculous. Someone else will pay for it. Maybe the University of Pennsylvania will pay for it. But the University of Pennsylvania hasn't paid for ModPo, although ModPo's kind of expensive. We'll talk about that another time. But the fact is the University of Pennsylvania has paid for, let's just say, the resources at Penn have made ModPo possible, and yet this is about tearing down the walls because all these people are spending time teaching people who haven't paid a dime and who are all over the world. So we're anti-wall, and that's why we don't like Frost's poem in week 5. So we'll talk about that in week 5. Anyway, so glad you called. Nice to hear your voice after all these years. Thank you.
Good to talk to you,
All
too.
right, take care. That was fun. Okay, so it's 610-616-3208. Let's go another round of tweets and postings, and then we'll get the mic around the audience here and see if somebody has something to say, something to tell you, something you should know. Okay, Davey, what do we got?
Ray Maxwell, who was bummed that he didn't actually get to talk to us, hey Ray, was saying that he wanted to shout out the Reading Out Loud study group in the forums. In Ray's words, they are having a funky good time.
A funky good time. Well, Ray knows his funk, so I think... Okay, so that's called the what?
The Reading Out Loud study
Good.
group.
All right, thanks. Anna, what do we got?
So returning to the question about smell and Williams.
Yes.
We've talked about some Dickinsonians. Maybe we should talk about some Whitmanians.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So smell is on the docket.
Yep.
Lily, I know smell's not your favorite.
No, it's okay. Actually, there's a little conversation happening on Twitter between Sanjeev and Michael Martin Shea about...
Michael Shea is one of our grad students here.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't sure if it was the same
I
Michael
think so.
Shea. Hi, Michael. They are going back and forth on whether smell has a Dickinsonian aspect to it or if it really belongs in the Whitmanian realm. So it could be an interesting topic for us to take up.
Okay, that's cool. Before we go to Jason, Sheila on Twitter says, "Go global, no walls in poeming." God, we just adapt to each other so quickly. Already poeming is now the word. T writes, oh, T, you're really messing with us. Imagine a world imagine a world poetry section in ModPo Pen. My life would be made. That's such a challenge. Okay, thanks, T. Jason, what do you got?
I've got a discussion going on about the R in Sid Corman's poem.
All right, we got to listen to it.
Yeah.
Oops, I just played the video. I didn't want the video. Says Sid Corman.
Sanjeev writes that R has become a repeating anthem.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Listen for the R.
All right. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going, feeling myself here as long as you are, as long as you are.
R. All right, everybody, we're going to do it from heart, by heart. Can we do it? Although Allie's not here, she'd be mad at us for doing this because she doesn't like to. Right. All right. No looking at the text. Can we do this? All right, here we go. It isn't for. You have to do your Sid imitation too. right? And then later we'll do our Williams imitations. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going.
Feeling
myself here as long as you are, as long as you are. All right. So, hey, Dave, you like this Corman poem. Say something about the R.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's little known fact. Sid Corman used to be a pirate, and the original version of this poem just ended as long as you, and then he just got into it, just defaulted to that. So.
Dave, you are so funny. This is the Dave that I remember who used to be funny, and now he's so serious. You know, getting PhDs in philosophy. I mean, really? I mean, are there any funny people in the PhD program in philosophy?
There is a discipline on philosophy of humor, but like E.B. White said, trying to study humor is like dissecting a frog. Nobody's really interested, and the frog dies in the process. So there's not a whole lot of humor.
Are you doing stand-up there and wherever you are, Arizona?
No, I don't like to
I think you
be
should
the center of attention.
Oh, well, you've just contradicted that impulse. That was brilliant. All right. Give the mic to... Who wants it? Everybody's looking down. Give the mic to Jamie. Jamie, I know you're relatively new to this poem. What do you have to say?
For me, the R, at least when Sid reads it, he drags it out. So there's a kind of longing that's emphasized in the last two lines. And it feeds into the whole poem of how he longs for the reader to be here. And But the thing is, I wonder...
It's as if he doesn't want to go. He just figures if he keeps talking, you'll still be with him.
Yeah, but I wonder how we'll feel if we haven't actually heard what he read. And if we read it ourselves, that could have a different meaning because of the intonation. Yeah.
All right, that's an interesting topic. Let's go back to Jonah. Any thoughts on the R?
Yeah.
Aside from that, it's piratical.
I guess my thoughts are the shift between the emphasis on the UR to the UR and the dragging out of that. And maybe it speaks to the kind of desire, longing that Jamie was just talking about, that the you isn't any one person. It doesn't really matter so much who you is. It's just this longing for other existence, other being.
Yeah. Erica Kaufman, I don't know how much Corman you knew before you joined this community, ModPo community, but now you know Corman. How has this poem lasted for you? And a sub-question would be, do you think it's a teachable poem? Erica, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry,
Okay.
I was just looking at the poem again.
Yeah.
Well, that's a hard question. I do think that it's a teachable poem. Corman is not, it isn't, he's not somebody that I've spent all that much time with. I didn't know him before ModPo.
Right.
And, I like him, but he's just not somebody I've spent much time really thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
This is a poem where I could imagine it being teachable, but I think context would matter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like why teach a poem like this? What is it doing in the context of what one is teaching? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Davey, why, if you were, and you'll never be told what to teach, I hope you'll never have a job as a professor where they tell you what to teach, but if you were told, listen, Davey, teach all this other stuff, but make sure you teach this poem, why would it be useful in a poetry course, for instance?
It might be useful for some of the reasons why folks are so excited about it in ModPo, which is to think about the sometimes stressful and often solitary reading practice of poetry as a communal experience and as an experience that means something to the poet. I think that that's something that matters to so many folks who teach poetry, is to think that they're teaching work they love, they're teaching the colleagues of their mentor, they're teaching their friends poetry, that there aren't that many of us and we're not that far apart.
Right.
And to think about it as participating in a collective practice with a lot of people in it. That's something so exciting about ModPo is you're reading a Divya Victor poem and there's Divya Victor. You're reading a Jason Zezka poem and there's Jason Zezka. And that we're thinking about the fact that you could bring a person into the room with you by means of reading a poem,
which is magical,
which
right?
is super magical,
It's not realistic.
And I think that like that's something that's hard about teaching poetry to folks who are not excited about it. Is like, why would I do all this work when I could just read a sentence? And the reason that you would do that work is to be able to luxuriate in hanging out in the poem. And that's something that we try to teaching experimental poetry in so many ways of like, what if you just stayed here in this small set of words?
Yes.
And this poem, this Sid Corman poem is all about that and illustrates it really beautifully.
I'm going to pose this as a question and go around and get lots of different responses to this. So in ModPo, most of the poems are metapoetic in one way or other. This is very explicitly so. Dickinson's poems are very explicitly so. Most of the Niederker poems that we've chosen are explicitly metapoetic. This is sort of double metapoetic or meta-metapoetic in the sense that it isn't simply referring to itself as a poem. It's referring to the necessity of the reader's presence, of there being a reader. It presupposes that the poem can't exist without a reader, right? So what I'd like to do, and I think that's important, because a lot of the blame, the criticism of modern and contemporary experimental poetry that, you know, regular folks, whatever that means, put on it is, why the hell would you work so hard to get meaning out of something? Why does poetry have to be about itself? Why can't it be about like the way we live our lives? Why does it have to be so inward? Why does it have to be so insular? Why does it have to be so academic? It doesn't have any heart. On the contrary, ModPo is out to prove that metapoetic, self-conscious poems about poetry have deep hearts. And this poem has a heart because it's trying to imagine with some desperation that there needs to be a reader in order for it to exist. So what I'd like to do is just and you don't go in any kind of order, just shout out other poems, either this week or any week in ModPo, where the reader's presence is important, presupposed and important. Okay, nominations are open. Lily. We can come back to.
Yeah, it's all right. I don't have one.
Just walking around.
Just walking around. John Ashbery.
Can you clarify what you're looking for? I'm confused.
A poem in which there's the reader's
the reader is
presence.
A character.
The character is presupposed as there, and also as in Corman, very important. Do we have readers in ModPo poems? Davey?
This is a viewer, not a reader, but February by James Schuyler.
And February is in ModPo Plus by James Schuyler. Yeah. Others?
I'd say The Way.
The Way. Absolutely, right? Which part of The Way?
The whole poem.
And because?
Because I think that the polyvocality that we were talking about before is something that Armentrout uses to involve the reader in the poem.
Mm-hmm.
I got another ModPo Plus poem also added this week, a poem called From the Other Side of Night by Francisco Alarcón.
Mm-hmm.
Very much about, imagining how the self will be written and also how the self will be read.
Okay. Others? Jason?
Maybe.
Sorry, Dave, Jake, you'll be next.
Not to promote myself, but my poem, Connected, I think was intended to do that. But I am also interested in the way that the poem I mentioned before, Elizabeth Willis's Survey, ultimately ends with, I hope you're awake when I get there, that you'll be with me at the end. And that's the end of the poem.
That is absolutely about a reader, and many people interpret the Corman poem as about a lover or a partner, but it's also possible that that's a reader or the ideal reader, and I'll read the end of the Willis poem. Even though I didn't include it on my list, I brought the end of it. I think we all need a vacation. I wish I were an oceanographer like my father, or the one he could have been. I wish the time could be turned off like a machine. I hope eventually we can speak freely of everything. I'd like to graduate from the United States of plastic. I'd like to face the future as if it were a person. I'd like to touch it and still come home for dinner. I want to introduce you to my boat. I think that everything can't wait until tomorrow. I hope you're awake when I get there, that you'll be with me at the end. If that's a reader, then what does it mean, Jason? You didn't know I was going to ask that. Why would Elizabeth Willis, or the speaker of this poem, say, everything can wait till tomorrow. I hope you're awake when I get there.
Right. Well, for the bulk of the poem, up until basically the part where you began reading, it's a poem about almost every few lines begins with, I worry about something.
Right.
And
it's a catalog of worry.
Yeah. And so there's a turn where worry is an internal state, and there's kind of a hopeful turn outward to include a you who almost the introduction of the you changes the whole tone and intention of the poem.
I have one more thing I want us to say about this, but Amber Rose, do we have someone on the phone? Okay, so the number is 610-616-3208, 610-616-3208. I just want to, there's a lot of poems in which readers appear, but here's a poem in which readers don't appear in this week's syllabus, in the main syllabus, and yet I'd argue that I think there's a reader in there, and it's You Are My Friend by Lorraine Niedecker, which we say is a poem about self-reliance and not about other people. But there is a you, and that's a friend. And the friend turns out to be a hand, the way we read it. And the hand, of course, is the hand as in handwriting, style of writing, my hand. Oh, I see that that's written in your hand, as in handwriting. But also the hand that does the writing. And in a way, Laurie Niedecker there, Lily, you can start with you on this, is her best reader, I guess we would say.
Yeah, I guess I'm still confused at what we mean by how, because I don't necessarily, like, I can see how you could do a metapoetic reading of that poem, but I don't know if I think the reader is the same character as, like, You Are My Friend in that poem. I think, I don't know, I'm just confused at the...
Do you mean in the Corman poem?
No, in You Are My Friend.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a poem about self-reliance, how can it also be about the reader? I guess that's my question.
If the reader is Niedecker. Amber Rose?
Yeah, this is not a call. I just had a thought about this.
No,
poem.
you have a mic.
Okay.
It's you.
Yes. Yeah, when you were going around and asking for poems, I wanted to bring this up, and I actually don't read this poem. I was really reading it thinking about her speaking to a you, but it made me think about this line from Beloved in Toni Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
And the line, it's someone talking, but the line says, she is a friend of mine. She gather me, man. The pieces I am, she gather them and give them right back to me all in order. And I think in that it's talking about a friend who helps you find your way back to yourself. So the way I read that poem was about a friend who introduces or reintroduces Lorraine to herself. Like when you feel, when you're sometimes disoriented and you need a friend that's like, no, this is who you are. Like, I'm going to remind you of who you are so that you can get through the situation. I think that's the kind of friend that she's speaking about.
It's so interesting that when we talk about the other as possibly a reader or someone who's supportive of your poetry, anyway, of your life, we don't talk about Dickinson, even though all these people are Dickinsonians in some way or other. And I would like to put in a claim, and I'd like to get a couple of responses to this, and then we'll move on. I'd like to claim that Dickinson does have a reader in mind. despite all the biographical, psychobiographical readings of her as writing for herself and then deciding not to publish and therefore not even imagining an audience. But I think there's such an audience there, and maybe we can spend a second talking about it. I think one of the worst things we do in ModPo is at the very beginning when we read I Dwell in Possibility. We're not totally wrong, but I think it's a matter of emphasis. We talk about that poem as only letting in the fairest. A visitor's the fairest. And we do that because we're hooked on this binarism of Whitman and Dickinson, and we know Whitman is all into, come in, I don't care who you are, come in, I want to talk to you. And that the speaker of that poem is a little selective. But in the end, because we're reading it, we're in the house. And that hasn't been selective. Somebody pointed us out to this poem, and we read it, and we became the you. So let's take a couple of comments about how Dickinson might actually be part of this conversation about imagining a reader. I want to go to Jake Marmer on this. I want to invite Ujwala to say something about this, if you would like. And why don't we start with Anna? What do you think, Anna? That was a curveball.
I agree that you can definitely read Dickinson with other external readers in mind, but what's wrong with being your own reader?
Well, nothing, apparently, because I like that you are my friend, Niedeker, as part of this conversation.
I mean, I feel like writing for yourself is just as powerful an act as writing for someone else.
Except that I Dwell in Possibility does suppose
Oh, totally.
that there are others.
But I think, like, to bring it to the essay we're writing this week, for example, the soul, that poem about the soul itself, is a poem that's turned very inwards.
Except there's an imagined spy.
Which is also the soul, right? I mean, we don't want to give away the poem, but
We don't want to give away the poem because it matters, like we're grading people's essays?
It matters so much.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I hope a lot of people are writing essays on that poem. Jake Marmer, any thoughts on Dickinson and audience?
I don't really believe in writing for oneself. I mean, it's always part of it, but there's got to be some other persona or collective or collage of people lingering in the background. Polish poet Adam Zagajewski said that poetry is the revenge of the introvert. And I think even for Emily Dickinson, who we conceive of as the introvert, there was an address there towards somebody we'll never know who. I wouldn't say it's a specific person. I don't think that's too easy. But a collage, some sort of imagined, shifting, ever moving you out there.
Mm-hmm. Ujwala, what's your thought about this? She needs a mic. Hello.
Hi. So I feel like, yes, there is a reader in that poem, because when she says, for occupation this, and I relate that to Niedeker when she says, when she's talking to her grandfather, being like, for trade, I chose to sit at desk, right? So it's almost like saying, this is what I do, and saying it to somebody else. So that's why I feel like there's a strong presence of a reader, that she's telling this is what I do, this is where you're at, this is where we're meeting right now. So I feel like there is a reader in there.
Very cool. Thank you. Amber Rose, I think we have someone on the phone. Okay. Who is it?
It's Colleen.
Colleen.
Okay.
Hello, Colleen.
Hi, Al.
Is this Colleen Knight?
Yeah, it is.
How are you? Are you in Toronto?
Yeah.
Wow. We're coming to Montreal. You going to take the drive or the train?
I'm not so sure.
Oh, no. You don't like
it would
Montreal?
Be a last-minute decision.
Okay.
No, actually, it's a very good place. It's a very good choice.
Did we make a good choice there? It's not the most
Yeah.
Anglophone city. We should have come to Toronto, where everybody knows, American poetry. But
It's pretty Anglophone.
I'm being a little silly. It's less Anglophone than Toronto, anyway. But fortunately, Zach is with us, and he knows French. So
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, how are you?
Well, I would feel I'm well, thank you.
Good. So do you want to talk about one of the poems or a topic in this week? This will be the last call, and then we're going to do final words. What do you think? What should we talk about?
You did bring up the idea of does Dickinson have a reader in mind?
Yeah.
And I want to speak a little bit to that.
Please do.
I just find like her poetry, it's all like a puzzle to me. And this is her way of communicating.
Yeah.
And she wants us to read it and figure it out.
Yeah.
And be curious about her. And I found she even has a bit of an artist journal, which is a big thing right now. You can see it all over Instagram. And we see that in her spider poem, and where she speaks to George in ModPo Plus.
Yes. Yeah, we did that at the Morgan Library. Yeah.
Yeah. So she does have a reader in mind, because you have to really figure out who George is. And you have to do your research to figure out who that is. And I won't say more about it.
Okay.
But,
why don't
it's
you,
kind of a mystery to that.
Colleen, why don't you hang up and listen to our response? Oh, Amber Rose is saying something. There's another. Oh, Colleen, you're caller number 2. You get a copy of Julia Block's book.
No way!
Yes. It's a really beautiful book. If we had more time, I'd read a poem from it, but I won't. Love this book. And, of course, Julia was foundational to the creation of ModPo, and is here as the director of the creative writing program. And so Lily's going to, Amber Rose is going to get your mailing address, and Lily's going to mail it to you. But would
thank you.
We're going to respond. I'm going to shape your question a little bit, and then we're going to talk about it. But will you listen offline, and will you please come to Montreal?
I'll do my best.
Okay, great. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for calling.
Okay.
All right, take care. Here's the question I want to ask people. What if it turned out, as Colleen suggested at the beginning of her question, what if it turned out in some biographical way, some very specific way about Emily Dickinson as a person, that this was her way of communicating? Just as some people are unable to form speech and they use a keyboard, some people are differently abled in terms of how they communicate. Some people use their own kind of mixed up language because of some neurological thing mixed up to us. What if this was the way Emily Dickinson communicated? We know that's not true because she wrote letters and she had friendships and she had family relationships and so forth. She went to college. But what if this was it? Is that interesting? Is that an interesting question to think about? And is it possible that poetry is a way for some people? It is the way for them to relate to the world. What does that make you think? Okay, who wants to start? Let's go to Dave Poplar. What do you think about that? And then we'll go to Sophia, who's holding the mic. Dave Poplar, are you with us? Did you hear that question? I think we may have lost Dave. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Yeah, dear. But, I need time to think about that.
Okay. Great. Let's go to Sophia. What do you think? Is that a thing to talk about?
This might be a roundabout way of answering your question, or not answering. But so in terms of like a readership for a poem like It Isn't for Want, I think the interesting thing there is that it kind of privileges like the implicit connection that people feel over like a complete understanding of the poem. And that's why in terms of like the consumerism of poetry, that's an easy poem to digest, and not necessarily because everybody is in the same house of understanding, but because it does elicit like that immediate connection. And I think with a Dickinson poem, there's still a house of readership that it's intended for, and that house may be like filtered through like the siphon of further understanding, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily that like discriminatory a house, if that makes sense.
Sure it does. Davey, your thought on this?
For my thought, I'm going to read a sentence from an interview with a wonderful disability scholar who works on Dickinson, who writes about Dickinson and disability. And she argues, her name's Claire Mullaney. She just finished her PhD at Penn. Her work on Dickinson is wonderful. I can post the interview to Twitter. She thinks about Dickinson's relationship to temporary blindness in the 1860s and says, I come to suggest that Dickinson was a poet whose poems were premised on limitation rather than possibility. And looking at her very particular material practices of constructing her poems, I come to argue that Dickinson registers disability through a confrontation with textual space, and that Claire's work is thinking about, we should be thinking about Dickinson as a poet who's writing poems that are the poems that she's physically capable of writing, that these are poems of limitation, that they're poems formed of creating an accommodation in language of what's possible for her. And that's, Claire would argue, not a hypothetical, but what's true of Dickinson's practice.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. I want to go to Jake quickly, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick round of tweets, and then we're going to get final words. So tweet and social media people keep looking. Jake, you quoted a Polish poet on the poetry as the revenge of the introvert. If we slightly change that question, it aligns with what Davey just said, which is to say, if it happens to be that a person needs this as a mode of communication, then this is the comeuppance to conventional ways of social intercourse. Because if you're not good at the conventional ways of social intercourse and you have another way to do it, then it becomes more than just something that you like to do in your room. This becomes necessary. Is that where you were going with that? And what more do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And the thing that David quoted, it makes a lot of sense. And I would just also extend it to say, I think it makes a lot of sense with Dickinson. And if you look at the envelope poems of hers, the stuff that we've seen some editions recently of the things that she wrote on like backs of the envelopes and all of that, you can really see spatial constraint there. And also just like this incredibly creative interaction with the physical space on which the poem gets written. But also, looking at the text and thinking, maybe that kind of writing, that kind of speaking is a more authentic way of communicating because it's closer to one's thinking, to one's kind of blend of emotional and intellectual that sometimes you don't have a room or context to say, or maybe you feel too constrained to talk like that in the society. But this is actually who you are. That kind of speech.
Yeah. Yes, that's a bold, in the middle of what you just said is something very bold and radical, which is that this may be a more, I think you said more authentic, a truer way to communicate than conventional communication, which is just larded on with all kinds of institutional and social expectations. All right. Tweets, quick tweets, and interesting forum stuff going on. Let's go around to that, and then we'll do final words. So, Anna?
Yeah, I've got a comment from Movita in the forums.
Movita.
Yeah, who writes, on whether Dickinson has a reader in mind, I think yes. In fact, I feel really special and important reading Dickinson. So would every reader reading Dickinson, I think. It's a one-on-one reading Dickinson, whereas reading Whitman is like being in a big party where even a friend's is invited. Which I think is great.
I like that. That's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Davey, tweets?
Ray says he'll be here in human form next week. So
Ray's coming himself.
We can look forward to seeing Ray.
Yay. Fantastic. That's good. We love Ray. Lily?
Yeah, Ama Bema, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, wanted to submit Bishop's One Art to our question of a gesture towards an outward reader for the last stanza. And that also Ray suggested Supermarket in California as a meta poem, and I liked Colleen's response was just "babies in the tomatoes!" exclamation point.
It's one of my favorite.
More
Babies
food for
in the
thought
tomatoes.
there.
It has a great internal rhyme that
Mhm.
just makes me laugh. Babies in the tomatoes. I think there's an exclamation point.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason.
Things are quiet on Facebook, but
let's quote that and put it up. Let's frame that and put it on a wall somewhere. Things are quiet in Facebook. Jason Suska said that.
Yes. But I was thinking also back to John Phillips' This, and part of the way I read it in terms of being a meta poem and engaging the reader is that in being human, we have our internal thoughts, but those internal thoughts are not available for other people until we generate language, either
Yes.
through speech or through writing.
Yeah.
And so and in poetry, the job, well, there's some exceptions to this, but the job of a poem isn't to convey information, it's to convey the complexity and paradoxes of thought.
Real thought. I mean, Stein thought that what she was doing was realism.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the way the mind really works. All right, this is going to be the quickest round of final thoughts. Dave Poplar first. Final thought?
Just that I'm looking forward to week 3 and 13 ways of looking at a blackbird.
Yeah, great. Week 3, the rise of modernism in the instance of imagism plus some early Williams. Erica, final thought?
I'm still stuck on the Corman. I'm still kind of thinking about the question that you asked before, and I'm wondering if it might be interesting to think about it isn't for want as a way to kind of teach essay writing.
Interesting. Why do you think that?
Because I think that it mandates a certain close reading and a certain engagement from a reader, but there's also an openness behind how he's saying what he's saying that you can
Yes.
only accomplish through poetry, that the act of writing prose about a poem like this might help prose become better.
So let me improvise what the prompt would be to these
Mhm.
student essay writers. It would be this. Here we have a poem in which the poet is saying that it's not that he does have something to say, but he's not interested in it. That he does have something he thinks you should know, but he's not interested in that. He's only interested in writing something that will keep you reading. Write an essay in which that's the case. That the essay is not about anything except for how it's not about anything except that we want readers.
Yes.
That would be cool. I like it. I should be a teacher, I
like
think. Jake, are you still with us? I think Jake might have had to go to class. Or he was already in class, but the students came in or something like that. Yeah. Okay, Davey, final thought?
Yeah, I just want to direct people's attention to From the Other Side of Night and ModPo Plus, the last 2 very short stanzas of which are, "Here nobody knows nor will know of the sea we carry within us," which feels like it's constellated in this conversation we've been having about Cormanian detainment, to be able to show up for yourself by reading and writing a poem the way that you're also showing up for someone else, and that we do that for each other every week in ModPo, and this is a poem that's really in dialogue with that.
Why the fuck don't I ask you to do your final thought at the end? Because now people have to follow that. Davey, you're amazing. And that poem is really good, isn't it?
The poem's really good.
Yeah,
People
we
folks
just
should read
added
it.
that.
It's really good.
Yeah. Alarcon. We just added that. Anna, final thought?
It's just so good. I wanted to say that my office hour got absorbed into the beast of the webcast today. But
Oh.
that's cool. It's fine.
It's kind of a big office hour.
Yeah.
Maybe we think of this as having joined your office hour.
Yeah, right?
Okay.
This whole thing was just my office hour.
Okay.
But if you want to leave me a question, I still created a thread, so if you want to leave me a question, I'll still see it and respond to it eventually.
Okay, great. Lily, final thought?
I guess I want to submit to a challenge, like since you put out a metapoetic reading challenge earlier, Mine would be the same way you can take "You Are My Friend" and make it a self-love poem. How could you take a Dickinson poem that seems to be very much a direct address and direct reader address, thinking of Wild Night, which is in ModPo Plus. How could you think of that poem as a self-love or self-referential poem, like a poem not addressed to a lover, which it seems to be?
As I recall, you're like a star in that video. Didn't you do that video?
Well, I did, but I don't know if I remember being a star.
You're a star. Thank you. Jason, final thought?
I would just urge everyone to take our kind of focus on pronouns, this, you, we, and or that. Whenever you encounter those in any poem, not just this week's poem, what's amazing about those words in poems is that in regular speech, all of those words mean one thing usually. We, the people here, or that, the chair. But in a poem, those words kind of generate wild clouds of possible meaning. And always don't take them for granted. Those are often the most important words in a poem.
Beautiful. Thank you. Amber Rose, final thought. And then can we get the mic to Joanne? I'd like Joanne just to say, because this is her, yeah, we have a mic. After Amber Rose, I'd like you to say something. Amber Rose, hi.
Hi.
How was personing the phone this week? Was that fun?
I really enjoyed it, actually.
Okay, you were good at it.
Yeah, thank you. My final thought is echoing the shout out that you gave at the beginning to my sister. To say that Sarah Ashley is much more of a poet than I will ever be. But she was teaching me close reading strategies. We were like together sitting on the floor in the basement for hours and hours and hours doing very intense close readings my sophomore and junior year in high school. And so shout out to her for teaching me those skills, which
Nice.
I'm putting to use now in ModPo.
Fantastic. And when's she visiting us?
Yes, soon. We're
Okay, good.
speaking it into existence.
Oh, that's excellent. Joanne, just a thought. Here you are after all these years, and you finally showed up, and it's good to see you.
Well, I don't want to leave. It's been enjoyable all along.
Is the mic on, Chris? Okay, so somebody has to show her how that works.
Now green. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to leave.
You don't have to leave. The writer's house is open. There's food and coffee.
No, it's I'm being here puts me in a conversation in the way that just reading and exchanging and viewing you all hasn't done. And I didn't know I was missing anything until I arrived here today.
That's a plug for people to come to visit us at the Kelly Writers House, if I ever heard one.
You know, I was someone who came to poetry reluctantly. I always loved to read and love the word, but I just couldn't get poetry until ModPo. And it's like in my blood after today. And I don't know how else to describe it except that I'm electrified by it. I'm delighted by all of the insights that you all share and how much time, effort, and wisdom goes into having this for this short 11 weeks every fall.
Oh, that's so nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you came. Okay, so I want to just shout out to two people, and we'll wrap up. One is Tony, who wrote, you have to read this because I'm only going to quote a couple of lines from it. He wrote Confessions of a ModPo Essay Writer as a thread, and it's really like he's bearing his soul here. You'll get it when I read just a couple lines. I'm not sure where to post this, but I thought it worth sharing in case it could help just one person out there who wants to write an essay but is maybe a little terrified by the idea of writing it or posting it. I've written more than a few ModPo essays now, and it is always scary for me, but it used to be even scarier. I would finish writing my essay and then be so scared to post it that I would think, what if I'm missing something completely obvious? The person who has to read my essay is going to think I'm an idiot. Or even worse, I'd think, I just spent 500 words writing about the most obvious thing in the world. And you know what? My fears were realized. The things I was afraid of happened. I completely missed something that was so obvious to someone else, and I wrote about the most obvious thing in the world, but no one called me an idiot. Instead, an essay reader's insights would completely change what I thought about what I wrote and about the poem, et cetera, et cetera. There's a long piece that Tony writes, which is meant to encourage and not to scare people. Please post your essays. I think you're going to find that unlike a lot of schools, maybe even your own school experience, like high school, or maybe even college, people are really nice. So write your essays, please, and post them. And I think you'll find that your fears and Tony's were unwarranted. I also want to finally shout out to Judith Church. She writes, after 6 years of lurking in this magnificent course, I finally figured out how to introduce myself. And she did. She's from Montana. She's lurked in the course since the beginning. She's honored to be part of this grand experiment. This is Judith Church. That succeeds so beautifully. As an educator, I thrill at the grand possibility that we are creating. I'm glad she used we. I love being part of this wonderful community. And she says one of her many fascinations with ModPo is the endless diversity of the participants. And I just wanted to say that I am now finishing an essay that's due on September 30th, which is the first time I've ever written in a scholarly, critical way about ModPo experience. I've sort of put that off. And it's an essay about crowdsourcing. And it's in a collection. It's about networking, poetry networks, and it's about crowdsourcing. And the main point that I found in my study of crowdsourcing, theories of crowdsourcing, usually in the business side, is that diverse crowdsourcing communities come up with better answers than less diverse or not diverse communities. And my attempt is not going to be to prove that, because it's, I don't think, provable in this context, but to demonstrate examples of how the diversity of the ModPo community actually alters the outcome of collective collaborative interpretation. So, and Judith's comment really bucks me up as I finish that essay. Thanks to everybody. Katrin Horowitz, long time, and congratulations on the novel, and Colleen Knight for calling, and others, and for all of our audience here and our TAs. I'm not going to individually thank you, but you people are fantastic. But Chris Martin and Zach Gardner need to be shouted out, because it's the 3-hour setup out here, and soon we'll be in the Arts Cafe, but not soon enough, I have a feeling. So we are going to be in Montreal, but not for until 2 webcasts from now. So next week on Wednesday we'll be back. Does anybody know what time? 10 a.m. and it's going to be about the rise of modernism. It's going to be fun. Please come back. Please post to the forums. Please go to office hours. Please have fun. Please share one of these poems with a loved one. Thanks. We'll see you soon.